Hey, what's up guys? So we have the Cliff Force legal now for the TCG. New Challengers is out today, so you're going to be facing off against Cliff Force if you are going to be going into some type of competitive event, or if you just like to play online on Dueling Network or DevPro. It is absolutely flooded with everyone playing this deck now. Now the deck is very, very strong, as the OCG has basically shown us that the deck doesn't even need their big boss monster, the Apocalypse Tower, as it is now called. It was previously called Killer. I might call it Killer a few times in this video. I'm just so used to it. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about how to actually side deck and beat the deck, because I've been asked over and over, Asian guys, how the heck do you beat this deck? It is just too powerful for the game. Now, first off, I do want to mention that in the TCG, a lot of players are actually just opt playing one killer. Personally, for me, I like playing multiple, because in the mirror match, if you dropped it, you basically won the game. Now, in the OCG, a lot of players did the same thing as most of the players are doing in the TCG. They're playing one, or they're just not even playing it at all. Like I said, it just gives you that opportunity to, if you're able to open up with it and you're able to just use Scout and just search out another one, you can just completely just win the game by just dropping that card. That's why I liked it so much. It gave that factor that, you know, I'm dropping it, I win, I don't do anything else. Now, we do have the Necloths coming out, which definitely can shut this deck down. Now, essentially, we won't only talk about the side deck cards, we'll also talk about playstyles. I'll briefly kind of go into playstyle right now, and then I'll talk more in depth in just a moment. But for the most part, what you want to do is not ever let them complete their skill. You must get rid of the Scout as quickly as possible, and do not let the game prolong to a state where they have the ability to just keep on bringing out cards over and over and letting them get free searches. And the deck is very, very consistent and very, very fast. So if you're playing a slower deck, you're going to have to make sure you are able to get rid of their Scout, which is essential, which searches out everything, as quickly as possible. Now, we already know cards like Bottomless, Trap Hole, Torrential Tribute are definitely very good against pendulum-based decks, because you can create that field where you can completely board wipe them. Maybe if you already have a field and you bottomless your opponent or something like that, you're able to continuously just, you know, push for game relatively fast. Now, at the moment, the three decks that I would say were most relevant in the previous format, which were the Satellar Knights, the Burning Abyss, and the Shadals, those decks generally do not actually OTK, so they're probably going to be able to survive more than likely for a few turns, and from there, like I said, you want to beat the deck as fast as possible, because the deck is going to basically reset itself over and over with a lot of free pluses. But I briefly want to go over how to get over Killer, because that is a card, or Towers as it is now called in the TCG. I briefly want to talk about that because a lot of players have been asking me, how the heck do we get around this card that is very strong? Now, I don't really think there's anything in most players' main deck that really deals with it, unless you're playing something specific. But if you want a main deck against, you know, the Cliff Force matchup, there's much better cards than main decking cards like Volcanic Queen. But for the most part, if you're really having a hard time against that card, I understand. You can use cards like Volcanic Queen if you're having to playing a Malefic deck, obviously Malefic, Cyber, and Dragon. But you can also actually side deck this card, simply because most of them actually play Skill Drain. Some of them actually just play one of the copies of the field spell, but the deck generally main deck Skill Drain. The OCG has been doing it for a while. A lot of them even do the Forbidden Chalice. Basically, they want to stop monsters' effects, because a lot of times that deck can get OTK'd if they don't have their scale up. A deck like Mermails can definitely still OTK. There's still a lot of players that love Mermails, and we may see a rise in Mermails simply because any pendulum-based deck needs to complete its scale, and sometimes it does not want to throw up things as quickly as possible. So Skill Drain definitely helps them stall out a little bit, and that's why you can definitely maybe try side decking Malefic, Cyber, and Dragon if you want to. If you're already playing a Malefic deck, then you don't even need to worry about that. But Injection Fairy Lily is a very easy card to summon, and if you're playing spellbooks, hey, this could maybe be you know, an extra spellcaster that you can add to your arsenal. But it's just able to pay 2,000 life points and it becomes 3,400, and that does deal with Killer or the Towers. You can also go into Chimeric Fortress Dragon. When I was playing a lot of the mirror matches, when I was doing ranked in DevPro, I matched them against Cliff Force a lot, so I actually just main decked multiple Cyber Dragons, and that still allowed me to go for my Pendulum play, and then it still allowed me to actually get my normal summon off, which I really liked, because being able to deal with Killer is kind of important in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So this is definitely a nice card just to get rid of Killer. If you're playing a Cyber Dragon deck, then you already have access to this. If you're playing something maybe like Noble Knights, maybe playing Heroes, we are getting some more Hero support. We got the Hero Structure deck announced for the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that will come out in January, so hopefully Stratus will come back then, and you're going to be able to have access to this real easy in a Hero deck. But you can also technically get this card out in 6 Samurais. Now, with 3 reinforcements of the army, it's relatively easy to bring out Excalibur, and in the OCG, what's funny is they've been side decking this card, because, I mean, there's so many different masked heroes in the game that you just might not have room, so maybe if you really want to, you could side deck it. But if you're playing 6 Samurais and you get out Sheehan, make sure you stop Scout. That is the key card that you actually want to stop. Next up, Star Eater can definitely actually deal with the Killer because it is unaffected by other card effects until the end of damage step when it is actually attacking, so that's pretty good for itself. Another way you could actually deal with, not necessarily a Killer, but just the deck in general. Because the deck has to pay a lot of life points, sometimes you can actually win simply by making them pay a bunch of life points, and then maybe if you get in like 1 or 2 attacks, then activate a Cylinder or a Dimension Wall, you can definitely win the game because of that. But the thing is, I do want to mention Magic Cylinder not as good as Dimension Wall in some circumstances, because Dimension Wall does not actually target the monster. It just, instead of you taking the battle damage your opponent, and it doesn't negate the attack. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong guys, but Killer would not be able to get Magic Cylindered, but you can Dimension Wall, kind of like how if some cards are unaffected by like traps or something like that. Well, Boku still makes it so you're not taking the battle damage, if that makes more sense, rather than like really affecting the monster. Like the Dimension Wall is not affecting the monster, your opponent's just taking the battle damage. Next up, in general, you want to stop their pendulum scales. Any pendulum based deck should be self-explanatory that you just want to complete your scale, then drop everything and just go for game. Now, Mystical Space Typhoon, the key card that you want to hit against their deck is going to be the Killer, simply because Killer is just or no, sorry, not Killer, Scout, my bad. You want to stop Scout because Scout is going to essentially start their deck. If they don't have Scout, sometimes they can open up awkward, they don't want to complete their pendulum skill, because generally the deck will not want to go for XYZ plays for the first turn. They usually only XYZ if they're in a really bad situation, because that's going to hurt them from being able to continuously just keep on dropping their pendulums over and over. And if you can disrupt their scale, and if they go for an XYZ play, you can definitely kind of win off of that. So definitely try to get rid of Scout as quickly as possible. And usually, like I said, first turn, they'll usually go for first turn Scout Search, and if they want to, they can drop everything. Now, I do want to mention quickly, if they go ahead and complete Pendulum Scale, drop everything, like, unless, of course, they're able to tribute for disc, their field is not too much of a threat, unless it's going to be the Tower or Killer. Generally, they won't actually go for a really huge extensive play first turn where they're going to drop, you know, all their monsters, because what happens with that is if you're able to board clear, because it's kind of easy to do when the monsters are lower attack because they were all pendulum summoned, if you can board wipe and then MST their Scout, sometimes it can really hurt them, because if they don't have the ability to actually complete their scale, they can't resummon everything, and you can simply win because of that. So you'll see a lot of players that are kind of newer to the deck, because I mean, it's really relatively easy to play, but some of the newer players or more inexperienced players, I would say, they'll invest everything in dropping everything as quickly as possible, and that's not necessarily what you always want to do, unless of course you know you're playing against an OTK deck and you have to keep those monsters up, because the thing is, if you know you summon some card that's able to get rid of like a card on the field and you're able to disrupt their pendulum scale after you kill like most of their monsters, they're just going to actually lose because of that. Now, Anti-Spell Fragrance, fantastic card against the deck, completely shuts them down, probably will activate that game factory instant win condition, kind of like how Vandy's Emptiness can kind of just simply win against certain decks. Anti-Spell Fragrance can definitely do that, and if you're going to a relatively large tournament and you're like, you know what, the only bad matchup against my deck is going to be the Cleese or Clifford's, you can actually main deck this. A lot of players have been tactically main decking the Shadow Imprisoning Mirror if they're not playing anything that revolves around Dark, just because the Shaddoll's and Burning Abyss have been super popular. Some players just main deck cards that you would normally side deck just to get that edge on your opponent. So if you want to, I would say this is probably the best card that you can actually side deck against any pendulum based deck, because they have to complete their scale. Now, I've heard of Massive Restrict, but the only problem I have with this card is that the Sacrifice just completely ruins the card's technical like downside. If they don't complete their scale, they can stall pretty hard with this card against certain decks. Other decks, you know, you can definitely just bounce back and do all their shenanigans and stuff like that. But the problem with this card is, oh, also I do want to mention that this card has to be sent from the field to the graveyard. So if maybe you have to have macro, or you're able to like banish this card, it's definitely good to do this, because then they can't get the searches out. But this card is just absolutely crazy, and that's why I just don't really like Massive Restrict too much. But it's definitely an okay card. You could try Overworked also, because they do actually change their attacks. So if you can have that blowout factor just popping their entire field, definitely can be nice, and it can come in handy. Next up, Mind Crush. We all know that knowing your opponent's hand is very key in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just ask Trap Dust Shoot, which is now banned. But Mind Crush, very good because they will be searching out definitely a lot. And if you're able to completely see what their entire hand is, and you know that they only have one scale of like a 1, you can MSC that one scale once they throw that out, and you know everything else is like 9s, or you know they have awkward levels, and they just can't complete their scales. So this can definitely disrupt them, and you obviously knowing what your opponent has is definitely good in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now next up, Fairy Wind, pretty easy card to play. Just destroy all face-up spell trap cards in the field, and both players take damage equal to the total number of cards destroyed by this effect times 300. Sometimes you do want to destroy your own cards, whether it be something like a Vandy's Emptiness, or just a card that's on field. Maybe you have a Phoenix Chain that's stuck on board, and you have a Gores. But certain times, Fairy Wind can be stronger than being able to just destroy just your opponents, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But yeah, sometimes, you know, destroying your own stuff can come in handy. Next up, Vandy's Emptiness. As any pendulum-based deck, this card can be the bane of their existence. But we do have the Sacrifice. Again, this card just kind of makes them super consistent, and is able to keep them alive if they happen to have like a bad hand. They can just throw this down on anything and just sit there all day until they finally draw the cards that they need. Next up is System Down. This is more of a card plays, but it definitely is still very good. So if you pay 1,000 life points, you get to banish all face-up machine monsters your opponent controls and in their graveyard. Now, I'm not sure about this because I actually have not asked, but if they're face-up in the extra deck, that is, to my knowledge, that is not considered the graveyard, so that would not get rid of the ones that are pendulums once they're like gone. So, I mean, you can look at it that way, and I believe that they are still spells if they're in the pendulum zone. Now, from in the monster zone, they're still monsters, but System Down definitely can be technically used, because if they're going for, again, those plays where they're just going to go complete pendulum scale turn 1 and drop everything so they don't lose, if you're able just to banish all of them, that's a pretty good effect, I would say. 1,000 life points is a cost, so sometimes, you know, if you're playing a deck that likes to pay life points, it can run into problems, but for the most part, it's not too bad. 1,000 is not like a 5,000 or something like that, but definitely a fantastic card in the right situation. Now, here's the card that's kind of like the Fairy one, but it is better in some ways. It's a quick play spell that says destroy all face-up spell cards your opponent controls, and you get to inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each. So that's a little bit better than Fairy Wind in most scenarios, but like I said, in certain scenarios, Fairy Wind can be definitely more useful. Now, last but not least, and this is actually one of my favorite cards. I wasn't really I wasn't playing this card at all when I was doing ranked and trying to level up by literally just playing Cliff Force against that deck over and over, because that's what everyone was playing. And right now, it's just it gets more popular as the deck comes out. I've noticed sometimes when new decks come out, people are just waiting for like the rest of the support to come out. But against people on DevPro, I mean, everyone is playing their deck. Everyone and their mother is playing the Cleese right now. So be on the lookout against that deck, because it is very strong. But this is my favorite card if I'm not playing Cliff Force. You get to target one face-up spell trap card on the field, destroy it, and if your opponent controls 2 or more spell trap cards, and you control none, you can activate this card from your hand. Now, it's basically like MST in most scenarios, but it's not cool like MST and can negate certain things like Tenki. No, I mean, it basically does the same thing. I just wanted to make that joke. But anyways, if your opponent controls 2 or more and you control none, you can activate from your hand. Very good effect against most pendulum-based decks. The only problem that I had with this card when I was playtesting with it is that they always go activate Scout, Search Scout. If for whatever reason they activate the other card and then they activate, use Scout in the Pendulum, then you're gonna super win, and basically they just got Shrek. You want to kill Scout. So the game plan, guys, as far as I mean, we basically talked about the cards that you can side deck against the deck, but the playstyle that you want to do against this deck is to play as aggressive as possible. Do not ever give them multiple turns. I know sometimes with the Sacrifice, that can definitely come in handy for them, and they can sit there forever, and they can stall against certain decks. But if you're able to prevent them from completing their skill, you're going to have a much easier time against the deck. I know it's sometimes some certain decks don't have access to that at all times. Certain decks like Shadal's, they have, you know, utility where they can just, okay, drag and pop real easy. But certain decks like maybe Burning Abyss, they can use Phoenix Wind Blast to kind of slow the deck down. And that deck can definitely play for a while because you can basically stall for a while with Burning Abyss too. But sometimes once Killer is dropped, you do technically just don't have anything in the entire deck. Kind of like how the Burning Abyss, if you summon Leo, sometimes you can deck the entire deck out just because their deck has no answer to that one card. And I understand. Sometimes if they drop towers, don't worry. Sometimes it's not your fault that you'll lose against the deck. Kind of like how you lose against Lightsworn. Sometimes it's just out of your control if you can even do anything, because your deck just might not have an answer at that right moment, or just even at all, because the deck was just too fast. It got out their boss monster. But if you guys felt like I missed out on any really great cards that we can use, or any good play styles or techniques we can use against the Cleese and the Cliff Forest, let me know in the comment section below. But thanks for watching, guys. And we do have YCS coming around just around the corner, and they will be legal, so I cannot wait to see what builds people use and what people actually side deck, if there are any cards in here that people have not already used. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Good luck if you're going to YCS, which is actually taking place, I believe, this week over in Anaheim. It's YCS Anaheim. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Azneyes signing out.